Alright, so this is a game I played recently. Yeah, this is actually the second game I played against this guy today. We played before and I lost that game. So just get straight into this. So my opponent goes e4, and I of course play the tried and true, the Caro-Kann defense, and my opponent abides for the advanced variation. And of course, the move here is bishop f5, the main line. There's also other lines. You can play c5, you can play e6 in some lines. E6 kind of transposes into a weird French, but bishop f5 is just the best move. And my opponent, I've been seeing a lot of talls recently. I've seen a lot of h4, so I was kind of more prepared for that. But my opponent plays in the best way, which is the move knight f3, well, knight g1 to f3. And of course, I play e6, no time. And my opponent goes c4, which is the second time I've seen this. Maybe not the second time, maybe I've seen it more than that, but this is kind of a new move. I've been kind of seeing it a lot recently, which is interesting to me because this is not like a really good move in many lines. It's just okay. I mean, c4, he has ideas of playing c5, and it's kind of complicated. So I thought here for a second, and normally in the Caro-Kann, you're the one who plays c5. But now if I play c5, of course, just to illustrate, my opponent can take here. And then I'm actually kind of worse because after recaptures, my opponent has a stronger center. My opponent might be able to take on c5 and just grab that pawn. It's probably the best move here. Maybe not. I'm not sure. But anyway, my opponent should be better. And I didn't want to get into any lines like this, so I'm not going to play c5. And I thought for a while, and I ended up just playing the move h6, which is just a waiting move. It's just passing the move back to him, basically, because I don't really know what I'm going to do. This is just like a complicated position, and I don't really know. I'm actually going to check the engine lines to see the best move here. The best move here is bishop b4 check, and after knight c3, I'm supposed to go for some knight e7 and play like this. Okay, I can get behind that, but that's kind of a little bit different. So I didn't go for that. I just played h6. Quite simply, my opponent goes knight c3, and I decided to go for g4, bishop g4, which is moving my bishop twice. But the reason why I'm doing this is for a tactical reason. The reason why is because I'm threatening here that after bishop takes knight, if the queen can't recapture, because if the queen recaptures, I'll take here, and bishop takes, and I will be capturing this pawn because it is now unguarded. So a move here for my opponent would probably be bishop e3, but my opponent disregards the threat and instead plays the move h3, which actually turns out to be the best move, not in my opinion, but with the computer's help, the tactic actually doesn't work. What the computer wants is after takes, queen takes, bishop takes is actually the wrong move. The best move is just simply bishop e3, and you're going to say that, and you're arguing basically that the c pawn is not necessarily useful for your opponent because I can't defend it very well. Like if I ever play b5, my opponent's just going to play a4, and I can't defend this because after takes, either I take with this pawn and lose my rook, or I take with this pawn and lose my rook. So that's why this tactic doesn't work, but I thought that this was a decent try, and I went for it. Now my opponent respected me and played gf, which was a mistake, and this is kind of what I thought my opponent had to do. I didn't see the line until after the game. So yeah, we're just going to play the next move, which is the move that I decided to play, which is dc, which I'm pretty proud of that about this move, because basically it kind of changes up my style of play. dc, my opponent will have to recapture, and then I'm going to be arguing that I have a better position because of his doubled pawns. He's going to put a rook here and start to attack me down this file. And, well, maybe he'll do that. Maybe he'll castle over here because he's not going to castle on this side with all the pawns advanced and my queen and rook ready to pound him there. So it's kind of tough to where he puts his king. I'm going to later put a knight on d5. It goes from e7 here. And hopefully my opponent will take, capture, and I'll be able to develop my other knight to c6, and I'll be much better. So that's my game plan. This is just a very interesting line, and I've already spent about a minute on the clock on move 8, so you know that I don't really know what I'm doing. And My opponent recaptures with the bishop immediately, and I go for my plan to put a knight on d5. My opponent goes bishop e3, which is logical. He's defending his pawn again, and there might be other reasons for that move, but either way, I go knight d5. Technically, this is an inaccuracy, but technically, I don't care. The best move here is just to develop the other knight. The reason why knight d5 is wrong is because my opponent actually goes short castles and is doing quite fine. My knight isn't not really pressuring anything. My knight's not going to ever go here. I'm not going to start attack even queen h4, although it looks scary. Doesn't really attack anything because after something simple like king g2, I don't really have anything. Let me show that. After here, my opponent just has simply king g2. And, I mean, this position is not... No one's going to win this position. I'd probably play like this, and my opponent's going to take, recapture, and somehow I'm worse here. But, well, I'm worse because I'm down on development. So, that's why knight d5 is an inaccuracy, but it's what I play in the game. And my opponent goes to the move queen c2 with a simple idea. The idea of my opponent here is very, very interesting. It's to start an attack on my king. Basically, is saying that I don't think that you're going to castle on this side. That's what White is arguing. I don't think that I'm going to castle on this side because that walks right into my attack. And he's going to put his pieces on this side of the board. So my opponent's going to have, so I'm going to have to castle queen side, and my opponent might be able to castle king side in some lines if we trade the queens, which my opponent would be happy with. So I go bishop e7, as I'm not scared. I'm just going to develop my bishop, quite simply. My opponent takes the knight, which is just wildly wrong because obviously I recaptured the c pawn, and now the whole point. My opponent did this really fast too. My opponent spent like 2 seconds on this move, and I was kind of dubious. I felt like he thought I missed something. I was considering here instead of bishop e7, I was considering some knight move up here, but that never really works, and it's not really interesting. So bishop e7, bishop takes, pawn takes, and my opponent goes for the move f4 with the idea of f5 and taking on e6. I disregard that and I play knight c6. What I should have done, and what I mean any logical person would do is going to play the move queen d7, and it's all about prophylaxis here. My opponent here is threatening, right? My opponent's threatening the move f5, but now he can't play the move f5 because I just take it, and that's a free pawn. So that's what I should have done instead. I didn't do that. I instead just continued developing like normal, and my opponent goes f5, and I thought, okay, ef is a big threat. My opponent's not going to play f6 because, of course, I'll recapture, capture, it's a free pawn. So ef is a big threat. Or is it? All right, sorry about that. My mom came into the room, so I had to pause the recording. Yeah, either way, let's get back into it. So my opponent plays f5 here. Clearly going with their plan of attacking me and ready to play fe. And I go queen b6. And I'm here arguing that after ef, this happens in the game, king d7, well, queen g6, king d7, this all happens in the game, so I'm not going to have to rewind. My opponent will have weaknesses on d4 and b2 that my queen can attack, and I thought that I'm not really scared about the g7 pawn because at the end of the day, after queen g7, I'll have many opportunities like queen here attacking both these pieces, and I should be much better. So I was never scared about this. My opponent goes for it immediately. For some reason, fe is not the best move. I would assume it is. The best move is rook g1, which is kind of wild. Rook g1 just developing the rook and continuing with the plan of attacking my king. But I really didn't think that this was all that good because at the end of the day, I thought I could take here. This doesn't work, which illustrates by queen a4, but you know, sometimes you miscalculate. So queen b6, all this happens, and my opponent castles kingside, which is interesting, very interesting. And I elect here. I'm calculating many things. I'm calculating, of course, knight d4. But then I thought knight d4, my opponent, I'm not going to have any of these checks. One, the knight guards that one. And 2, this one will be guarded by the queen when it comes back here. The queen's going to put pressure. If I bring the bishop like this, the pawn actually hangs, and that would be bad because of the pin on my king. And also he can take this pawn with a check. And I didn't think that was any good, so I didn't take with the knight. And I also decided not to take this pawn either, because I thought maybe he could sacrifice his knight here, and I was getting worried. After something like after queen b7, my opponent might have like rook a b1, which is actually the best line. And if I take here, I thought maybe this first, and then I would be losing. It is losing. It's not as losing as it otherwise would be. But basically, if I bring the queen back, this is over. This is GG. I'm done here. I'm super done. Because, for example, if I go king c8, which makes sense. This is just a free bishop, first of all, because the knight is pinned. And second of all, this is a quick checkmate. And third of all, if you say, okay, well, I'm not going to go king c8 because I want to defend my bishop. If I want to go king d8, well, then either way, he just takes the knight for free, and I am losing this game. So I didn't take that pawn, and I decided to instead just develop my rook with rook f8. And now I have a couple of pieces on this side of the board, and these rooks might be attacking this vulnerable king. Of course, my opponent can't take on g7 because that's a pin to the king, and he would lose the queen. That'd obviously be bad. And I thought, I'm probably just clearly better. I'm not. There's still some issues with the position. But after rook f8, my opponent goes knight a5, and I was like, okay, I'm winning. I must be winning. I thought I was better earlier, but now I think I'm completely winning. Because with this move, knight a4, not knight a5, I am going to win this pawn. The reason being is because after queen here, which is what I play, my opponent will go back. My opponent will probably go back. I'm going to take on here. And my opponent doesn't have any queen g4 stuff because this is a defended square of the rook that I put on the move prior, which is pretty cool. And this almost exactly happens, but my opponent, instead of going knight c3, which I thought was reasonable, my opponent instead just loses the pawn outright with the move knight c5. And I thought this was, and my opponent probably thought that this was probably the best he could do. And I captured, of course, and pawn takes. And now this pawn is hanging. A lot of other stuff is hanging, and my queen is actually coming over to the king side. I could take this pawn after queen takes. I could go knight here, and then the queen would have to leave, and I'd get a big attack, but I decided to instead not do that, and instead go knight e7, which I thought was even better, because I'm attacking the queen, first of all, and now my opponent can't take with a check because of course, this pin, and after something like maybe this to try and get a queen trade, I'm of course not going to oblige, and I'm going to try and checkmate my opponent very quickly. And I thought this was very smart. Actually, after queen g4, probably the best move. It's kind of hard for me to make a move. I guess I have to trade queens, huh? Yeah, I guess I have to trade queens, and then I can relax here. Even though I'm not even up a pawn. Because these pawns are just so weak. Like I can probably play knight g6. This doesn't actually work because of f4, but still, this is kind of death to the position. So after knight e7, my opponent goes queen d3, which of course loses the game on the spot, but not in the way that you'd expect. I decide to instead of like acknowledging that the queen moved there, which is a decent move, probably one of the best, a decent move if not for my response. The queen has ideas of checking my king in this scenario, but you have to realize that this is only one check. After king c8, there's nothing. Like, this queen doesn't have any infiltration squares, doesn't have any more checks, and there's nothing. So after the move queen h4, which I thought was just really smart, I thought I was just winning. I didn't know how he defended against simply this. I thought he'd have to probably move his bishop, back like this. And I thought that I was just better. I was just getting in. I was going to double up my rooks. Well, not there. I was gonna double my rooks like this, and I was just getting in, and I was gonna win. I thought this was very, very smart, and I thought my opponent was lost. Actually, the way to draw this position, which is very interesting, I of course did not see this during the game, is this check. And after king c8, which I thought makes a lot of sense, c6, and I'm not in time. Because after something you'd say, knight c6, easy, knight c6, rook fc1, and if I capture this pawn, which is the best way to play, there's actually nothing else I can do. If I capture this pawn, of course, rook takes, queen takes, and this is a draw. If king d8, I actually lose to, oh my gosh, that's actually kind of brutal. I lose to rook c1. Oh my god, that is evil stuff. Oh man. And he's starting some like major things. For example, if I just go here, his threat is queen c8, king up, and then a simple checkmate with the move rook c7, and the pawn. This pawn actually saves my opponent, but that's hard to see. I didn't see this line. Oh, and it's just a perpetual if my opponent, if I go to b8, just perpetual. Very simple. I can't escape the checks. So that's a drawing line, but I did not see that, and my opponent didn't either. So my opponent immediately lost the game with the move king h2, which of course simply loses to the move rook f3, and I'm just winning. I'm checkmating my opponent. For example, if he, I don't really even know what he would do. Something like this. I of course have the checkmate of rook h3, and either way the king moves, I play queen g4, and I mate him with a ladder mate in on the g file. My opponent decides to go for one last attempt with the move rook h1, but this still loses. I have to be a little bit careful. I can do either of two things. The fastest way is rook f2, which is not what I played. I played the most simple way, which is the move rook h3. If I take with the queen here, this is not as winning. This is not a draw. Well, it's not a draw. I'm still winning. But here I have to find some. I have to find some nice moves. I have to find rook g3 after fg, queen g, king f1. I have to find rook f8, and here I'm still in the driver's seat. But this is a little more complicated. So I found the best way to play, which is of course rook h3. This is the best way in my opinion. It's not the best way. The best way is rook f2, and I play queen g4, and my opponent goes here, and I checkmate him with rook h1 mate. So that was a pretty good game. I beat a stronger opponent, gained 9 points. I lost to him in the last game I played, but I redeemed myself, and hopefully I can win more games like this later. I thought this game was pretty fun, so I wanted to share. Yeah.